Thank you.
No problem.
John, are you good? Wonderful.
Yep, I got all of the PowerPoints in a single document that I can share.
Awesome. Julia, you have a helper, which is wonderful. And I just want to say, who is that, Julia?
I'll say hi, Lydia.
Hey. Oh, so big. And Jess drew the short straw last night, huh?
I have to give you credit. You really hung in there and your energy did not flag at all.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see how I do today. It's been, we had an untimely death of a 17-year-old today, so I'm not doing so great today.
Oh, so sorry
Yeah.
to hear that.
And John at Ward High School.
Oh.
So anyway, we've got to let people in. The show must go on.
All right. Ken Gucker.
Yeah,
Jack,
enjoy. Chris, it's nice to meet you.
Jane. Chris, you're on mute.
Oh, how you doing? Nice to meet you too.
Camilo, did you begin recording just now, or was I? Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Camilla, can I let in the presenters?
Yes.
Okay.
Welcome, everyone.
All right. These are all great names. We'll just wait. Some people. Chris, so if you notice someone that's got like audio that's not supposed to be playing, you can hover over their name and you can mute them. So that's something that we'll want to be cognizant on. John, Bill Toussaint.
Yes. Yes. He's with us.
Yep.
He's in.
And Greg.
Mr. Greg. Oh, here we go. Admit. Tyler. Representative Smith. Let me finish up that email. Chris, you can the waiting room for me for a second. Senator invite. Senator Lopez invite. So I'm right now. Senator Lopez got him and Dan. Down. You still see the chair in the call? Oh yeah, she's here. Okay, never mind.
Thanks for your patience, everyone. Just gonna give me one more moment and then we will get started.
Representative McCarthy-Vahey, I believe all of our speakers are here.
Thank you, folks. I was wondering, Mr. Clerk, are either Senator Cassano or Senator Wong? I know Rep. Zullo is going to be late.
Neither one is here, but Senator Cassano literally just sent me an email not 3 seconds ago. So oh, Senator Wong is right here though.
Wonderful. And Mr. Clerk, is Senator Cassano on his way in? Is that?
I mean, so he just sent me an email. So I just texted him saying, oh, Wade says he's stuck in public safety, but he's being logged in right now by his aide, Wade, so that he can have two screens up at the same time.
Wonderful. So if you don't mind, thank you all for your patience. We'll just see if we can get Senator Cassano in here. We'll just wait one more minute and then we're going to go ahead and start.
Also, Mr. Guskowski has made the document available to me, the whole PDF. Do you want me to make it now available to the whole committee?
Yeah, we can. We'll address that as we go forward. That sounds like a great idea, though. If you want to, you can go ahead and send it.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, actually, I think we'll go ahead and get started. And thank you all for waiting, for joining us. It's such a pleasure to have these incredible speakers here, all of this tremendous GIS information and knowledge here. So we'll convene this meeting, an informational forum of the Planning and Development Committee. I'm Kristen McCarthy-Vahey. I have the privilege of co-chairing the committee with Senator Cassano, who will join us as he's available. We're also joined today, I know Senator Wong is here on the call, and Rep. Zullo will join us as well, and I'll give Senator Cassano and Rep. Zullo a chance to make some brief remarks when they join. But for now, first I'll turn it over to you, Senator Wong, for welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm eager to learn more about this, and I know you've been such a big champion of it. When I hear you talk about it, the excitement and the possibility. So you were very persuasive. So I'm eager to learn more about this and see how that can help our municipalities. And so thank you for holding this meeting.
Thank you, Senator Wong. So because we want to hear from all of you who are here, our GIS professionals, I'll just start by saying GIS is something that not everyone knows what it is. We're going to hear a little bit more in just a few moments about what GIS is and why it's so important. But I first had a conversation with our planners and John Guskowski to help me understand and to learn more that I had learned from our COGS previously about how GIS helps our towns and cities run. Any of us who use, our phones, we rely on GIS in our day-to-day lives as well. One of the things that's really occurred to me as I've learned more is that we have a lot of great people doing a lot of great work, and coming together and working together and the opportunities to do that is what makes it even better and stronger. There's so much that I could say, but What I will say is that this is going to be a tremendous conversation. I want to thank the Planning and Development Committee members and the other legislators who have joined us. And I know that there are folks who aren't able to make it today because there are multiple hearings, but are planning to take a look afterwards, particularly to the presentations that we have. So with that, I'm actually going to turn it over first to one of the people who's really been helping to educate me and lead a conversation that we'll hear more about and talk more about a little bit later, which is that person is Emily Wilson. Emily is the geospatial educator from UConn, but she also is just a master in this space and has been an incredible teacher and guide. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Emily, to talk about what GIS is and why it's important. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be working on this together. Should I share my screen then?
If you, I have the presentation up. I can just share mine and get to the start of your presentation if you want, Emily.
Are you going to drive it then?
If you don't mind.
Yes.
Okay,
And
there's a lot of clicks.
just for speakers' purposes, John will go ahead and help with the slides and the presentation. So you can just direct him verbally in terms of which slide to go to. So back to you, Emily.
John, can you see
Can
me?
everyone see this?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
If you can just maybe watch, I'll just note when to turn because there are a lot of animations here. Okay, thank you. My name is Emily Wilson. I work at UConn. I am with the Center for Land Use Education and Research, or CLEAR, as well as the Department of Extension in the College of Ag, Health, and Natural Resources. So I was asked to talk about what is GIS and why it is important. This is a huge topic. So I'm being very simple. It's very simple, very brief here. So I know I'm leaving things out, and my GIS colleagues who are here listening, please bear with me. So GIS stands for Geographic Information Systems. It is a system. It's not just software or applications or data, but it's the combination of all of them and how they are used. It is a profession. Most GIS professionals have a degree or two in GIS or related field, and it's also a tool that's used to answer questions from all different disciplines about all different things. So how does GIS work? It works with layers. These are generally single topic data layers that are tied together with geographic coordinates or a location. So here's an example where we have different single topic layers that stack together because they have common coordinates represented by the grid there on the bottom. So how else does GIS work? It works by tables. So the tabular information, or in GIS we call it the attributes, they are tied together to the features that exist on the land. So in this case here, we're looking at cell tower locations. And if we click on one of those, we can see what's in the table for that particular feature. Here we are looking at, go ahead, another one, a linear feature here. So this is the information in the table for this roads layer. And one more. And here we have a parcel or a property, and we don't know what that is until we can click on it and look at the table for that property and see that it is Harkness Park. So the attributes are the key to display, to answering questions, to summarizing things, selecting, querying, filtering, and all sorts of stuff, so, and a lot more stuff. So how does spatial data work? One thing to know is that it's often vector data. So vectors data sets are either points, lines, or polygons. So we just saw those three with the cell towers, the roads, and the properties. Some things to know about vectors is that they have attributes like we just talked about. And the quality concerns are, what is the spatial accuracy? Are they in the right location? What is included or excluded in that data set, both the geographic features and the table information? And is it updated? Another type of data to know about is raster data. These are pixels that have geographic coordinates. So here we are zoomed way in on a road. And as we zoom out, you can see those pixels together form this image. This is an aerial image, meaning it was captured from a satellite, or sorry, a sensor on an airplane. Another source of raster data is when that data is used, basically image processed, to create something new, in this case, land cover. So in the case of land cover and other data sets, they can be quantified. so we can know how much area in this case is forest or lawn or impervious. Okay, next. So some things to know about for, whoops, go back one, about raster quality is the detail, which is really the size of the pixel, and there are a lot of other factors, but we won't go into those today. So let's bring it all together. This is a bare earth elevation map. This is a raster data set in what we would consider a base layer. And here's another one, which is some of the aerial imagery taken in the spring. And that's also a raster data set. And here's a summertime aerial image of the same area. These are all considered base layers, as well as the land cover for this area. So let's start adding some vector layers and take a look. So here we're looking at where several towns intersect. Those are the black lines. The red and the thinner black lines are roads. We have a couple points on there. Those are the cell locations. Here are the building polygons for this area, those little tiny shapes. We can see that some of those buildings weren't on roads, which is kind of interesting. So let's add the property boundaries, or what we call parcels. And here they are. And if you can see, some of those parcels have buildings, some of them don't. Next. I want to point out over here in the corner, you can see that that town boundary black line does not line up with our blue parcel line. And this is one of the big problems we have here in Connecticut. Okay, so let's put the aerial image under there, which really gives us a lot of context. So we can see that there are, in fact, let's go one more. There are, in fact, buildings that are missing from this buildings layer. So here they're shown in yellow. So this layer needs to be updated, and I'm pretty sure it's from 2012, so that's no surprise. And one more. We can also add our address locations on here. So these look pretty good, and these are used for emergencies. So that is reassuring that that is a more up-to-date data set. So my goal here is to show how it works and not throw any of my GIS people under the bus. I'm sure I did not find the latest and greatest data layers for this area, which is another issue, but hopefully you get the point. So the base layers of imagery, elevation, and land cover are statewide and used by everyone, or many people. Town boundaries are the seams that tie the pieces together, and precision is important, just like if it would be in carpentry or sewing or engineering. The property boundaries really run the land records and our municipal functions. They're also critical for emergency response at all levels: public health, economic development, natural resource protection, and a lot more. Next slide. So I'd be remiss when I'm talking about GIS, not to talk about the importance of sharing this information. One is the GIS data, which is used by mapping professionals. Where is that and how do you get it? And second is the maps, or really the result of the GIS data. And this is useful for everyone. GIS data formats can generally not be opened in regular software. So we need to share this as PDF maps, online web maps, applications, dashboards, and story maps, and other things that take energy and resources. So why is GIS important? I'm going to let the rest of the people speaking here today prove that. There are so many reasons and so many applications. So what I want to talk about briefly is why GIS coordination is important. GIS provides the building blocks for applications across users and disciplines, and we all have overlapping geography with many similar needs. So here we are, one state. I'm going to flip through these, John. We have 151 House districts, 36 Senate districts, 8 counties, 9 COGs, 10 larger watersheds, 51 middle-sized watersheds, 177 smaller ones, and they keep going. We have 5 emergency regions, 23 health districts, 3 DSS regions, 6 DCF regions, 4 DOT maintenance districts, 11 state police troops, 169 towns. One more. We work in many jurisdictions in our small but mighty state, and it is the same land. Next slide. It makes so much sense to have high quality, periodically updated base layers that exist for all of these jurisdictions. The alternative in the current situation is that the different groups buy or create the same data layers for the same places. It is also a two-way street. Statewide data flows to smaller areas, and when local data is created with some sort of standard, like they have the same attributes and codes, see, you've learned something already, then it can be aggregated into pieces like a puzzle. So it is time. We need to be proactive and not reactive. It's too late when the hurricane is at our doorstep or the pandemic showed up unexpectedly. When this high quality building blocks are in place, there is so much potential for applications, efficiencies, and improved capabilities. So I encourage you as you listen to the applications following to listen not just about data and applications and software, but about the people that are really influenced by putting it all together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily. And next, I'm going to turn it over to our slide master, our slide facilitator, who's going to talk a little bit about the GIS working group that helped lead to this conversation today. John Gizkowski, John, with the Connecticut chapter of the American Planning Association. And John and Emily have been tremendous in this. John, to you.
Thank you, Representative McCarthy-Vahey, and thank you to all of the state representatives and senators joining us this afternoon. I'll be extremely brief because I am not the technical guy. I am not the one to give you the information you need. What my role here is really being the guy who knows the guys. And as a planner and as a member of the Connecticut chapter of the American Planning Association, our goal is really to make communities better. And we do that by identifying those gaps between where we are right now and where we want to be, and find ways to bridge those gaps and to make the implementation of our vision happen. That is what planners do. And a major role for us is facilitating and to make sure that we have subject matter experts and stakeholders at the table to tackle these questions. And so when this had come up with a lot of my GIS colleagues, and I serve a number of towns across the state and have encountered this problem of lack of coordination and of unnecessary replication of efforts when it comes to geographic information and mapping. Talking over and over with the GIS community, that something ought to be done and we should coordinate. And the big difference this year and the last couple of years is that we have champions. Representative McCarthy-Vahey and Senator Needleman in particular listened, and they recognized the value of this sort of coordination and the need to understand what Connecticut's resources were and our needs relative to GIS. And they picked up this ball and ran with it. And so what we did, in coordination with Emily and myself, we assembled the list of stakeholders and subject matter experts to work with Representative McCarthy-Vahey and Senator Needleman over the course of late summer and this fall, to really come up with an understanding of where we were relative to other states and what the existing capacity was and needs were within Connecticut to come up with a game plan for how we would move the state forward in terms of coordination. So that was really my role. I'm not the expert. I'm just, sort of helping to convene this group. And the most useful thing I can do is just continue to run the slides and keep the conversation moving forward. So I'm happy to turn it over to my excellent GIS colleagues so you can hear some of the outstanding work and the real deep needs for coordination across many agencies and departments in our state. So with that, I will turn it over.
Thank you so much for your leadership in this conversation. So as you can see, first up we have DOT, the Department of Transportation. And with us today from DOT is Greg Ciparelli. And Greg, I hope I pronounced your last name properly, but also please let us know if there's anyone else from DOT here today who I'm missing. I just want you all to know that many of the folks who are here today have won awards for their work with GIS, and Greg is one of those folks. So turning it over to you, Greg.
Thank you very much. I appreciate everyone's time today. This is something that the DOT in particular has made a really strategic and kind of massive investment in fairly recently. We saw the value in kind of expanding our GIS capabilities. And I think I'm hoping that we're able to kind of convey some of the deliverables that we've been able to produce today, but then also at the same time, some limitations that have maybe come in based on this kind of lack of a centralized GIS resource at the statewide level. So just to give you some context kind of on where we stand right now, we have about 400 credentialed users right now across various environments, but it is growing fast. We're continuing to do outreach internally. We're getting buy-in from our own stakeholders. And I think it's kind of important to acknowledge that the DOT, with kind of its massive size, we've already kind of gone through almost what we're proposing on a statewide level, even within the DOT itself. We have a lot of different users generating a lot of different data with a lot of different sections within the department that perform a variety of functions. And really what we've been able to do is utilize the GIS to kind of centralize and break down a lot of the data silos that exist. Emily spoke to kind of how do you get data to the right people. This is how the DOT has determined is the best way to do it. So we're filling various roles in our data lifecycle. We have people populating data from an office environment using desktop or web-based applications, kind of like Emily mentioned. We also obviously have well over 1,000 maintenance workers who are out in the field, and we're working at ways to get mobile devices and applications in their hands so that they can help us to keep our data updated and maintained. One of the other things that we've done is utilize some software to be able to kind of link together some of our existing business systems and pull that data, those attributes that Emily mentioned, kind of into our GIS on a regular schedule. And it's really made it a lot easier because it allows a lot of our users to be able to continue to work in the system they're used to, but then still kind of harvest that data and get it in. Like I said, we've made a strategic investment. We're trying to break down a lot of data silos. And the really big thing that for the DOT was that we had a lot of people developing data kind of on their own, collecting it once, using it once, and then it would become stale. We're trying to do exactly what Emily said. We want to collect it once, have a steward of it, and then use it many times. So you can go to the next slide, John. Just to give you an idea of kind of some of the things that we've utilized our GIS for. We're mapping our project locations around the state. We're drawing polygons for those, like Emily mentioned. One of the great things with the GIS is you draw that polygon and we have additional data underneath it and we're able to harvest it into our systems. It's a real big efficiency we've gained. The public road network, Emily brought up the highways. We are maintaining a geospatially accurate public road network for all 23,000 miles of road, public road that are in the state of Connecticut. That includes the interstates, the express, any of the expressways, the local road system, the state park, state forest, state institution, all that entire road system. Like I said, about 23,000 miles. We're also working with our environmental planning office to develop a drainage network so we know where everything is draining off of our highway. And then lastly, we're utilizing that public road network, what's called a linear referencing system, to be able to load a lot of attributes or provide access to a lot of attributes around the state, including things like our traffic volumes. So we can go to the next one, John. So how does this help us? One of the big things and one of the drivers that we had was that we wanted to be able to plan our projects a little bit better. It was always having to know the right person to go get the right piece of data, or you'd spend a good portion of your time just trying to access it. A GIS centralizes that, puts it in one spot. Anybody can go and kind of self-serve to grab the data that they need to kind of further their project along. We're also under some asset management constraints. Everything that's out there, every mile of guardrail, every square foot of pavement is an asset that the state owns. We want to be able to keep it in a state of good repair. It's way more cost effective for us to keep our assets in good condition than it is for us to continue to kind of rebuild them once they've completely deteriorated. So we're developing a process and a system to be able to manage our data in a GIS throughout the entire life cycle. We've also been working with some of our partners, UConn in particular, to develop some data-driven safety applications, what they call the Connecticut Roadway Safety Management System. It relies heavily on a lot of the GIS data the DOT is maintaining. But what it does is it allows for network screening. It allows for project prioritization. And what it does is it helps us choose the right countermeasures to make our highways a lot safer at the right locations at the right times. There's some state and federal reporting that we're also supporting utilizing the GIS, but one of the main benefits that I think the constituents of Connecticut would see would be basically increased data transparency with a lot of our partners. We're able to easily make available a lot of our data for them to be able to go into that self-service environment that Emily kind of talked about, where you have web apps or web maps out there. They can ask their own questions, change the parameters of their question, and use the different query tools that we're able to put the data out there to kind of investigate and get access to a lot more transparent and regularly updated data. So a couple examples there is our fuel stations that's now out and being used by the state police. And then we've also, during the COVID pandemic, been able to monitor a lot of our traffic volumes and use it as a way to almost keep an eye on, one, our speeds that were happening on the highways, but also where we were seeing kind of recovery around the state. So the example right there is the Berlin Turnpike, some of the volumes that we saw on the weekend during the initial stages of COVID. And we can make adjustments accordingly. So go to the last one, John. So why do we think that this statewide development is kind of important? There's a bunch of kind of performance metrics to data: the timeliness, the accuracy, the completeness, the uniformity, the integration across systems, the accessibility, and then the authoritative stewardship. That last one has been super important at ConnDOT, trying to identify who really is the person or the office that kind of should be managing a piece of data. If it's something that's related to education, it should be in the education section, right? If it's a DOT asset, we should be the ones maintaining it. but it really does kind of outline and put into a central location the data that people can go and get to. They have confidence in it, they use it more, it increases the reliability of the decisions that we're making. And we really want to kind of move into the 21st century and use data to kind of drive our decisions. There's been some interesting times where we find interesting insight that we would not have been able to see before if we didn't have access to a GIS. So on a statewide level, and Emily kind of mentioned it, the uniformity, having the attributes be the same kind of across is something that would need to be kind of standardized for us to be able to hopefully pull in some of this data that's coming from some of the local partners or even some of our regional ones. So it's kind of what ConnDOT's been up to, and I'll turn it over to our next state agency, I think.
Thank you so much, Greg. And we have, as you can see, Deep up next. I believe we have Stu DeLand and Bill Toussaint here from Deep. And gentlemen, you'll tell me if I'm missing anyone else. Turning it over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Bill Toussaint, and I'm one of the 2 GIS administrators at the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, or DEEP. My coworker, Stuart DeLand, will speak briefly after me. A little bit about myself. I'm newer at DEEP and working for the state of Connecticut. I started about a year ago. I'm also newer to the Connecticut GIS community in general. And before DEEP, I worked with GIS mostly in municipal settings in Mass and Vermont over the last 20 years or so. So I've seen firsthand the value and importance of a statewide GIS center that Connecticut is lacking in both Massachusetts and Vermont. Massachusetts having Mass GIS and Vermont having Vermont Center for Geographic Information, both valuable organizations that you'll hear more about ahead. But an overview about DEEP, approximately about 800 employees. It grows to over 1,000 or so with seasonal employees over the summer. And about 400 of those 800 plus employees are GIS users. They're using some kind of desktop application or online application or a combination of both. DEEP has a robust GIS infrastructure in place that's been heavily invested in that. And we've been an active player in the Connecticut GIS community for many years. And DEEP has about 280 data sets that we own and maintain, including aquifer protection, bedrock, drainage, critical habitat data, some of the more popular data sets. We also share this data with federal and state agencies, municipalities, and higher education, and much of which is available through our open data website. Next slide, please, John. Next, my coworker Stuart will briefly talk about some of the GIS uses at DEEP. Stu?
Thanks, Bill. So my name's Stuart DeLand. I'm one of the other 2 GIS administrators at CT DEEP. And as he said, we produce a lot of primary data sources at the agency, and that's kind of dictated how we use GIS and how we serve that out to the public. So the first 2 points are specific to the agency. GIS in general aids, its spatial analysis is very important to most of the divisions in the agency. We specified wildlife remediation and state parks as 3 of the big players when it comes to the divisions that use it almost every day and their analyses, but I think pretty much every division uses it in one facet or another to kind of aid in project work and the flow of overarching goals. And in a similar vein, the visualization of agency assets, natural geographic features, human development, and raw field data allow for streamlined project decision making. This allows for not just the GIS analysts, but project managers to be able to see exactly what's going on stage by stage within our project and kind of make decisions based on that. As we are, as part of our mission statement is transparency and getting data served out to the public, being able to take what we have visualized and put it and host it through web-based servers and cloud storage allow both interagency and the general public to access the data that we have and visualize it quickly for projects, personal use, or whatever they're working on. And finally, as Bill mentioned, we've had programs going for so long, especially related to GIS, that the ability to modernize a lot of our legacy programs, taking paper forms and turning them into digital accessible spatial records is extremely important. That's kind of been one of our main uses for GIS. And in general, the more the more we can interface and get our data out to the public, the better. So any effort related to centralizing the GIS efforts in Connecticut is something that CTD will always be behind and absolutely support. Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for the work that you're doing and for sharing this. You all are sharing a lot of information really quickly, and I recognize that because we have so many great presenters. So thank you for that. And we'll have, I should have started by saying we will have time for questions at the end. I know this is, as I sometimes say, it's somewhat wonky with our GIS work, but I think it's just so tremendously important and central. So next on our list of presenters, we have the Department of Public Health, who I know is being pulled in so many different directions, and we're so glad you're here today. We have Lori Matthew, Eric McPhee, and I believe Gary Archambault. I'm not positive if I saw him. Not seeing everyone on the screen, and I'll turn it over to you and say thank you to the folks of the Department of Public Health, especially these days.
Thank you, Representative. I'm Lori Matthew. I'm a branch chief of environmental health and drinking water. I'm here with Eric McPhee, who works in our drinking water section. Gary Archambault cannot join us today. He is the architect and the data manager of everything that you see with COVID-19. So the dashboard, the mapping, everything you see there. So he is quite busy. So we're going to do our best, Eric and I, to make up for where I know Gary has presented to you all before. So thank you for having us here. And thank you on the behalf of Commissioner Deirdre Gifford from our department. Next slide, please. I'm just going to give a brief overview, and it's hard following DOT and DEEP, okay? They are, two agencies that are, they both, as you both heard them both speak about, they have agency-wide GIS. We don't really have that in our department. That's how I would describe it. We started similar to DEEP. If anyone remembers historically, Howie Sternberg, Howie started GIS at DEP when DEP was DEP. Howie was the architect of GIS for our state, as far as I recall. We worked with Howie to bring it to the Department of Public Health. And then from there, and we thank our colleagues at DEP for helping us get to where we are. But we are not centralized. We would like to be more centralized. We have infectious disease. We have drinking water, we have environmental health, we have a variety of, we have immunizations, we have tumor registry, and we sort of struggle to centralize. A lot of what we are able and capable of doing is because of the federal grants that we have. And that we have people that are not, our titles are not GIS specialists. We don't have any one individual who is a GIS specialist, and that's their only job. We have people like Eric, who is an engineer who oversees a unit that has a regulatory work to do, but also GIS expertise. So in order for us to collaborate just internally, it can be a struggle because of that. And we have about 800 people in our agency, but we have about 20 to 25 users. And we struggle even with payment for licenses. And again, we use our federal funding for that. And I want to thank Tyler Claycamp as well, who I see. Tyler, good to see you. Years ago, we hired Tyler within the Department of Public Health, and he did GIS. It was wonderful to have the skills that he has and bring it to our agency. And it really is personality-based versus title-based. Since he came into the agency, was very capable of helping us get to the next level. And then now it's Scott Gall at OPM, and we can't thank him enough for his leadership. So I'll turn it over from there, turn it over to Eric McPhee, who's much more of the expert in the details. So Eric?
Thanks, Lori. So yeah, generally speaking, there's a lot of sort of programmatic use. We sort of learned separately, but we're trying to bring it all together now. We recently were able to develop an in-house enterprise system and a portal that's been tremendously helpful with housing our information and publishing. You may have seen, for example, with the 20 or so power users that we have, our coronavirus map and dashboard has had nearly 2 million views. So there's a lot at stake, and we're trying our best to put it all together. A lot of recent efforts, we've sort of seen the light. A big thing for us would be just what do we do with the data and how do we share the data? Next slide, please. the bulk of our users are currently, they have a bunch of data. They know where their nursing homes are, et cetera, et cetera. They want to put it on a map and be able to make decisions based on that visualization. But we're trying to get more. That's our 3-minute timer. Okay. But we're trying to expand and get more in the way of spatial analyses and geoprocessing and use the fantastic tool that GIS has to offer and sort of bring it together, but then also share and work with other agencies like we're doing now, whether it be DEEP or DOT or the COGS or municipalities, and be able to provide them with the information that they could use. Next slide, please. Quick 2 examples of something we're doing now. You may have seen these. These are public-facing dashboards and maps that we've done. The coronavirus one in the upper left, and then our drinking water mapping in the lower right. These are tools for the public or for agencies to use. For example, when land use decisions are made or applications for development are made or water companies or the public need information on drinking water, it's all there for them on the web and for their use. I know my time is up. Next slide, please. Where do we want to go? A big thing is, we need to sort of spatially enable all of our data systems that we have in-house. We need to continue to expand the work that our staff does and provide them with the tools to do so. We need to expand staff expertise. But really the big thing is the data and how do we manage the data? How do we share the data? How do we get the data? Where do we house the data? And those would be tremendously helpful if we could make advances in that. And that's it, unless Laura, you have anything else?
We do, just to wrap it up, we really do, Eric, thank you. We really do want to work with everyone. We believe that it would be a great effort to be able to share information across agencies, and not only state agencies, but local agencies and regional agencies, as well as the federal agencies. There is one thing I will put on the table to be mindful of, is some of this data at the very detailed level is a security risk for release and is covered under 1-210 or some of the subdivisions of the FOI laws. So that's something to just be mindful about. And in particular, I will mention something in drinking water, the release of well points for public water supply wells. There's about 4,000 of them. We do not release that information because it goes back to an FOI law to keep that information held secure. So there's very few of those, but they do exist. And I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that as well. Again, we're here to work with you, and we think this effort is very well timed. And I think, our agency, while we only have 20 users, they are power users. Somebody like Eric, somebody like Gary Archambault, but if they leave, we lose a lot. So we thank you for your time, and thank you for giving us our time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, I don't think that I can say thank you enough, and to Gary on behalf of the entire state of Connecticut, for the work that you're all doing right now, which is literally life-saving. And I know that a number of us left a call with the commissioner to come over here. And certainly one of the things that was shared was a map where the appointments were available for vaccines, for the call-in number. So we're seeing very much in our own day-to-day lives how this data and these maps and these layers and this information is really critical. So thank you so much. Speaking of saving lives, we have next up the desk folks for the Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection. I know I saw Bill Ewell as he jumped on earlier, and I believe also Dan Chaya, who are with us today. And thank you very much for being here, and I'll turn it over to you.
Oh, thank you very much. This is Dan Chaya. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, and we see your slide.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, I'm on my phone right now, so I apologize if it's a little bit weird. Hi, I am Dan Chaya. I am the GIS coordinator for the Division of Statewide and Emergency Telecommunications for DESPA. We handle 911. For the entire state of Connecticut, it's 107 call centers and 350 workstations. Within DESPA, we have three divisions that handle GIS mostly. There's our division, there's Homeland Security and Emergency Management, and then there's the state police. Within our division for 911, the entire setup right now is mapping based and GIS based. So if you need a call routed in the state of Connecticut for a 911 call, it's being done with a mapping system, which requires us to have accurate address data to do that mapping, and other base layers, which some of the layers include address points and street center lines. Homeland Security is also very much map-based in their Emergency Operations Center. They use a lot of different layers of information, including flood data, sensitive areas, all sorts of data like that for their system when they're activated. The state police also use GIS and mapping. One place is for dispatching. They use many layers of data that we use, including streets, and also their crimes analysis unit has begun in the past couple of years, and they're ramping up a new system for analyzing crimes analysis. If you want to go to the next slide, please. The one thing that our agency really relies on is municipal and regional GIS data. We collect data for all our GIS from the towns and the regions. Without it, we don't really function. I'm speaking from the 911 standpoint. We get a lot of our data directly from the towns, a lot of tax parcel data, a lot of street data, in order to accurately portray addresses. So we get a lot on this map. You'll see that we have parcel data. We turn that into address points that are used for locating a 911 call. Without that information, our system won't work, and we won't be able to respond to emergencies in a timely manner. So it's very important that we have municipal data. One of the roadblocks is having to have getting that data together in a streamlined approach, which this sort of GIS statewide coordination would definitely help with that. Thank you very much.
Dan, thank you so much. And you'd think that someone, maybe John, helped put together a good order, because you talked about that data, and I know we've had some great work from our COGS. Yesterday we had a long meeting with Planning and Development, and thanks again to the committee members for sticking in with us and coming back today. And we got to hear from our COGS, and as they three of our COG leaders, as they testified, they talked about GIS on a number of occasions. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to our first presenter from the COGS, from CROG, the Capital Region COG, Eric Snowden, or as I sometimes call him, Eric with a K. It's very wonderful to see you here today, and I'll turn it over to you. And Dan, if you can do me a favor and mute yourself, that'd be wonderful. All yours, Eric.
Thank you. I'm Eric Snowden. I'm the IT and GIS coordinator for the Capital Region Council of Governments, and I'm going to give you a little bit of info on COGS and GIS. COGS, as you may know, support a wide variety of planning functions, from economic development and transportation to public safety. And it all requires some kind of mapping and geographic analysis at some point. We also maintain a travel forecast model, which it consumes a whole lot of demographic and geographic data. One feature of COGS and of the state in general is the wide range of GIS capabilities in municipalities. We have towns that have only a handful of full-time employees at all, never mind having any kind of GIS function. And then we have cities and large towns that have very advanced GIS systems, and the whole range in between. We work very hard to try and provide value to all of them, regardless of what their needs are. One thing we depend on is current base data, which has been mentioned already. Orthophotography and LiDAR, normally captured through aerial aerial acquisition projects, airplanes. And that's required to generate the base data for, for a lot of what we do, our regional data sets that we use for our services. And a fact about orthophotography that kind of underscores the need for, a repeatable state program for orthophotography is that when a municipality or a smaller area does a project to have orthophotography or LiDAR captured, they do that at a cost of 2 to 5 times what it costs for a large project such as a whole state. The economies of scale are huge with aerial photography. There's a lot of money saved with just planning the project. Instead of having to do that 169 times, it's one big project. The next slide, John. And in the past with aerial projects, we've managed to get them done periodically, but they've always been cobbled together with different players. And there's a lot of people on this meeting right now that I've worked with on acquisition projects. CROG, we managed one on behalf of the state in 2016. There was one that the state partnered with USGS because and NRCS. And it just seems like the wheel has to be reinvented every time. And, municipalities and state agencies and universities and private industry, they don't know when the next one's coming or how it's going to happen or what the data is going to, how it's going to work out. That's just one of the things that we really need. These are just some applications of orthoimagery and LiDAR. That's a very short list. It's much longer than that, what actually is done with that stuff. And I just wanted to point out too that these 3 graphics here I pulled from a presentation from over 10 years ago that I worked on with a couple of folks, GIS professionals from COG member towns, and it was for a presentation promoting statewide aerial acquisition projects, and that was over 10 years ago. So this is a need that has been going on much longer than that, and just a very long time. Next slide, John. At our CROG, Capital Region, we have 38 member municipalities. We maintain a region-wide parcel data set and an online viewer. And so what that means is 38 different sets of parcel data, the actual parcel lines with 38 different schemas and 38 different levels of accuracy. We maintain a link between this parcel data set and 38 different sets of CAMA assessor data. And with CAMA data, that's the assessor's database systems. There's 5 different vendors. At least in our region, there's at least 5. Vision, if you've heard of a CAMA system, it's probably that. But even our towns that use Vision in common, they all have different schemas. So it's basically 38 different ways of storing CAMA data. A parcel data standard for Connecticut. There have been some folks, again, on this meeting that worked very, very hard on developing a state standard. And I'm sure that, there's probably more work to be done on that, but that's something that we don't really have. I mean, the amount of time that would be saved by having at least some basic standard for parcel and CAMA data. I'm not saying limit it to those fields. Towns could customize it any way they feel like they want to. But having some basic set of that kind of data would save an incredible amount of time. And parcels are just a building block data set for especially economic development. I mean, among lots of other things. I think that's about it for me. I think MetroCog's next.
That's right. And Eric, I should have complimented you on your background. Nicely done. Your background behind you. Next up, my own COG, which I might be slightly partial to in terms of COGs. I love you guys at CROG and everywhere else too. We have with us Matt Foldice on here and Mark Hoover, who is going to be presenting today for MetroCog. Turning it over to you, Mark.
Hi, thank you. My name is Mark Hoover, and I'm the GIS director at MetroCog. I'm joined with our executive director, Matt Folda, who can attest to the benefits of GIS to our municipalities and the support from the CEOs we've had in our region, and also the need for the statewide data and coordination. So I'm just going to be talking about kind of how our program got started and the benefits we have for our municipalities. It was really kicked off in 2013 with the RPIP grant, which was used to establish kind of these base layers that everyone's been talking about. So for our 6-town region, we had our own flight, which captured the ortho imagery, LiDAR, planimetrics, which was the building footprints, and we had a parcel development. The idea behind our regional GIS implementation was to offer support to towns, as Eric mentioned, who don't have any GIS ability. So ranging from Easton all the way up to Bridgeport, who have GIS staff, and offering those individuals kind of cost savings for these base layers that we acquire. So from that project, the ortho imagery and the LiDAR themselves cost $214,000. If you extrapolated that cost out from our region, for the entire state, it would have cost $7.1 million. As Eric mentioned, we had a flight in 2016, and it actually cost $2.2 million. So if all the cogs kind of go by themselves and buy their own imagery, there's a tremendous cost associated with that. Once we were able to kind of establish this regional system, we've had a lot of support from our member municipalities, so much so that we now have a buy-in from our municipalities to support this ongoing GIS we have. Next slide. So in our program, we've had a lot of different success stories to talk about. We have public parcel viewers for each one of our towns. We also offer base map data, which is kind of that building footprints, sidewalks, roadways, things that you can get derived from the imagery. And basically we can offer that data set when there's different construction projects being undertaken, and you can provide that directly to the consultant, and they can save money for those projects. We also are diving into different economic development scenarios using zoning data and 3D modeling to see how different projects will look in the towns. As a transportation agency, we also do some multimodal modeling. So looking at our sidewalk network, seeing how long it takes people to get to bus stops, and things like that to see if there's any underserved populations. We also use this a lot for assessment. So our assessors in our region use our oblique imagery that we acquire to kind of look at a 3D look at buildings to see if people have constructed things on their properties and haven't taken out the correct permits for. And as Dan said, we also work on our address points and supply them for the emergency services. Next slide. So we were able to get this program up and running and had the support from our member CEOs, but the entire success of this program depends on updated data. And as Eric mentioned, we've been relying on statewide flights. And so from our 2013 data, we've been able to update it with the 2016 flight and the 2019 flight, but we don't know when the next flight is coming. The uncertainty makes it very difficult for us to plan and to keep this data up to date and usable for all of our municipalities. The other thing I want to emphasize is that the lack of statewide coordination has resulted in underutilized data sets. So there was a lot of investment into this regional GIS for our MetroCog region, but as you can see, MetroCog is the tiniest of cogs in all of Connecticut, spatially. So all of the things we were able to develop kind of end at our cog border. Even within the cog itself, as Eric mentioned, we have our parcel data that we've developed, but each town has their own parcel data set and CAMA data associated with it. And those attributes do not line up. And more importantly, the parcels themselves do not line up. The lack of a town boundary data set to put those parcels together so that when you join two different municipalities together, the parcels don't overlap or have gaps is essential. And also, I just want to emphasize that, as I mentioned, the regionalized data that we have stops at the cog boundary. So we have this aerial flight, we have the LiDAR, but the other cogs around us don't have it. So for any of our towns that are bordering another cog, the data stops at that boundary, which results in underutilized data sets.
Mark, thank you so much for sharing that information. There's so much to talk about. And I know we're moving through pretty quickly, but I want to keep us going. Next, we have, as a CCM representative, so the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, John Elsesser, who's from Coventry, our town manager, who also joined us yesterday for our public hearing. Mr. Elsesser, I welcome you and turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. So you've heard that towns seem to be at the base of gathering all the essential information. Just want to let you know that as well as being the town manager of Coventry, I'm also the chairman of the 911 Commission for the state. So I see a lot of the GIS information there, and I'm a member of the Capital Region Council of Governments Policy Board. So I hound Eric with a K frequently for information. So we can go on to the next slide. I'll skip the bad joke of changing gobs of interesting stuff into a geographic information system. So I kind of went over this. Let's keep going. So Town GIS plan, we view this as a system, and a lot of the things that you've heard already, a system starts really with a land record transaction. A deed is filed in the town clerk's office. Based on that information, you get owner, description of the property, and a deed. That then gets moved into the assessing and taxation issue. And as has been mentioned, the systems don't talk to each other. So I have a information land record system that I now have to transform that data into the KMA, the assessment system, and then into a taxation system, all of which have different core data sets. And what we really need above all else is a common data dictionary in old terminologies or standards that would follow that. So whether I want to use vision appraisal or some other. An example, we just updated our permitting, which is the next kind of link on this infographic, to a new version of View Permit, which is an online permitting software. And we were surprised that all of a sudden our data sets didn't line up because the condos are listed differently in the assessment system than in the building software system and a tax system. How you label a condo as a street address or unit 1 or unit A. So now we have to go through this whole detailed data cleanup system because there aren't standards. So all that's inefficient time, but it's necessary to make that system flow. And we don't have a GIS person on staff. We have a whole bunch of people, and it depends on who I hire and how long they stay, who has the biggest skill set. So we do rely on the Capital Region Council of Governments to provide some assistance to us, but we struggle a lot trying to just work through these projects because it's not attainable for us to have that type of staff at the local level. We do have 2 Esri licenses to try to update and do some things ourselves. So eventually that system gets into our land use and building application. As I mentioned, that's all becoming and is available now online. But the GIS system information is used for all our plan of conservation and development update and mapping. We have several of those layers up available to the public for sewers that we had to gather that data ourselves. And how did we gather this data? Our data is very raw. Most towns had some aerial photographs. Our basic data set was from somebody flying a plane in the 1960s, and the plane may not have been flying level, which distorts the maps. And we had these giant maps that somebody then took a pen and drew property map lines on. We then, about 10 years ago, worked with Central University to take pictures of those maps to create kind of base maps that we have. And then we started going around and collecting every A2 survey we could to try to patch things in. And we tried to get information from Connecticut Department of Transportation because we had a highway project, but that was all done in a different system, a microstation system. So we had to find somebody that could convert that. And we had to go to out of state to do that. So we're trying to piece together, but there's many inaccuracies, not only at the town lines, but within the towns of how accurate that information is. But as accurate as it is, we try to then forward it off to the 911 system. It's used in many other ways, but internally, we had our own in-house GIS system that we had to talk people into giving up to go with the regional system. So that information then is put over into Public Works. We use that for tracking our plow trucks, and in emergency situations. We had a really bad storm a number of years ago. Roads were blocked. We had a woman who needed to get to the hospital for birthing a baby, and we were able to locate which plow truck was closest that we could get the roads open for ambulances. So this is really hands-on practical information, life-saving information. We were able to respond and save a lot of time to get that road open to get the ambulance in. But Public Works also use other function, and we'll get into some of these functional uses. But obviously, public safety, we have all the police and our police dispatch and fire emergency and ambulance response. Recreation uses it for trail maps, and communications. We use it to target neighborhoods for emergency broadcasts, and of course.
And Mr. Alcester, I'm gonna, if I may jump in, I know we want to get through a few other presenters and make sure we have time for questions. Okay. You can summarize, that would be wonderful.
Great. So we use it on a daily basis, and there's one last slide that you can look at in the distribution. So I took these various aspects of what we use and gave you kind of the some of the key operations that we use GIS for. You see, we use it daily. We use it for many functions, but it's not fully accurate, and we need to coordinate and create the data sets that make this information interchangeable. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you would maybe go back, John, if you would, just one more time. I know there was a lot on this slide and that we cut things short. So I just want to say two things. One is that committee members should have received this in your inbox, but we will also make sure that these slides are posted on the committee's website so that anyone who might be watching would be able to have access to this as well. I thank you for sharing just the very specific. I love the example of figuring out where someone was to be able to help someone get to the hospital to bring a baby into the world. That's a really great example, the very practical uses. So with that, I am going to turn it over to UI. I want to say a special thanks to UI because a number of folks have been participating in ongoing conversations, and I was remiss in reaching out to them much later, and they've been just great about jumping in at this point. And I really welcome and would like to welcome Pete Sampiri. And Pete, I think I mispronounced your last name. I'm not sure I ever got it right, but Pete, I'm going to turn it over to you, and if you can correct the pronunciation of your name so we all have it right.
I think you're the first person to ever say it right on the first try. It is Sampiri. Everybody says Sampierre. But anyway, a little bit about our GIS, and this slideshow is very brief. A little bit of the history. We were mandated, I believe, in 1985 by the former DPUC to institute a GIS system, and it sat on somebody's desk for 5 or 10 years, and I think we went live around 1996 or 97. So I think we have one of the longer running GIS systems, and it's gone through many iterations since then. We use it in our company. Our engineers use it when they're about to plan, say a new neighborhood is going in and we need to provide electricity. They'll use it to design the new infrastructure. If they have to make changes and rebuild something that's existing, they use our GIS system in our maps. One of the more major functions we serve now is to feed our OMS system, the outage management system, and that's what we use for storm restoration work. Our dispatchers use that the entire length of a storm to dispatch trucks, to send emergency crews to wherever they need to be, and things like that. We create special maps during the storms. Like we have so many contractors coming in from out of state. When it's a major storm, we don't have enough electronic devices to give to them. So we give them paper maps. It gives them the event, where we think the problem is, because OMS will predict it, and streets. And so that's how they get to where they need to be, and they can fix what they need to fix. Underground as-built. I want to say around 10 years ago, we took our conduit plans, our underground, buried wires, from paper to GIS, and it's Conduit Manager is the tool we use. It's and we also use ArcFM, which is an add-on to the Esri platform. It's Schneider Electric out of Colorado. So that has all of our underground records are in there now. And we also had an agreement, and for the life of me, I can't remember exactly when it was. I see Megan is on the call; she might remember. But with our municipalities to share data. And we had to go up to the state, and our VP at the time, they wanted poles, streetlights, service points that also carry the medical information. So if the towns would request it, and we would refresh it quarterly. But that's all we do right now. Certain things we can't share. I guess if you could change the slide, I think talk about that a little bit. Can we go to the next slide? This is just a screenshot of our GIS, showing some of the primary, the secondary street lights. You see the big crosses are our medical customers, things like that. And the next slide is what it looks like in OMS. So this is where our dispatchers can use it, and they can actually open switches and to see how we can back systems up. Like if a neighborhood loses power, we can open one switch, close another one, and feed them from a different direction, things like that. And next slide. This is what I was just talking about. We reached an agreement with our municipalities to share some of our non-secure data with them. Pole, street lights, service points. And when I say they're medical customers, it could be an oxygen generator, it could be a nebulizer for someone with bad asthma. But we actually physically tag the meter so that our meter services personnel don't go out there and shut them off. But we also map it, so kind of can tell emergency services if they needed that information. It can also help the police. I don't know if you've ever seen a primary wire come down and stay energized. It looks like the biggest welding torch you've ever seen in your life, bouncing around on the ground. It's kind of scary. They can go a couple poles away, get the pole number, and then they can figure out which pole it is by using their GIS. They don't need us to tell them. So that's kind of the reason that we threw poles in there too. Next slide. As we said, some of it can't be shared because of NERC regulations, mostly transmission type things. And that's in the post 9/11 world. That's when that came about. Like I said, it can help police departments assess high crime areas or high occurrence of traffic accidents at night, because we have the street lights. We know where they are, what poles are on. If the area is dark, we can tell. We can put more lights. Emergency planners, if you have areas where it could be elderly housing, with the medical issues, then that becomes a priority. Maybe one of your top 10 priorities, because we keep a priority list for restoration. And it could just help you if you have to contact us. You can get in your system, you can get accurate pole numbers, addresses, everything is in there. So if you're going to report something to us, you would have accurate information. That's it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And it's really amazing to hear and see how everything is so connected. And I love that you referenced Megan McGaffin with SLR Consulting, which is formerly Malone and McBroom. A lot of people more familiar that way when you hear about your local town projects. They work with a lot of our communities. And I'm going to turn it over to Meg now. Thank you so much for all your work throughout this as well.
Oh, thank you so much. Let me start my video. John, I'm going to just request control for a minute, just because I didn't have time to make a ton of slides, but I think that I can do, okay, excellent. Oh wait, no, I think you have to give up remote control And let me share my screen. Share my screen. Okay, so if you could stop sharing your screen, John, for just a minute. So like I said, my name is Megan McGaffin. I am from Maloney McBroom. We're now known as SLR Consulting. I'm sure a lot of you are kind of familiar with us. We've done a lot of projects in your town. We do school planning, redistricting. We help with that well project for DPH. We design bridges, we build things, we do studies, all sorts of things. And all these projects that we do interact with the land. We use GIS to give ourselves the context and the data that we need to make decisions about what we're going to do in our projects. So the first thing, almost every project, we start looking for parcel data. Connecticut doesn't have a mechanism in place yet where I can just go online and download a current parcel data set. Our compatriots in Massachusetts, they have a coordinated GIS system called Mass GIS. You can get regularly updated parcel data right from their website. Another example of something that we're doing right now, we're working on a very large project for all of Fairfield and New Haven County. We're working with UConn on a climate resiliency project. And one of the things we wanted to look at in terms of this big planning project is zoning. We really wanted to be able to look at an aggregated zoning layer and do some analysis based on how the individual towns are using their land. But we couldn't because the data just doesn't come across. We can go town by town and get parcels and the COGS aggregate parcel data, and we could go to them and kind of get some stuff together. But we just didn't have the time or the budget to make 50 requests for individual town zoning layers, and then spend the dozens and dozens of hours it would take to aggregate all those different pieces into one set that we could study. Vermont, though, for the state of Vermont, they have we can do that there. We do projects for Vermont. So Vermont, you can just go online and just download their each town zoning. You can get their parcel data, get all that kind of stuff. Another thing that we have here in Connecticut, like many have pointed out, aerial photography. Aerial photography is absolutely vital to our business because we need to be able to see what's on the ground before we can make any adjustments to it. Because really our whole business is helping local, regional, state government, private partners to do something with the land. We're either, we're building bridges, we're rerouting school buses, we're helping to understand your community's flood exposure, all these things, they're all based on the ground. So we need a good solid image of what's there so we can help, everybody make good decisions going forward. So here in Connecticut, this is Rhode Island GIS. This is another one of our neighbors. They have all these different aerial photographs that they purchase and publish on a regular schedule. You can just go in and grab them. Now, Connecticut, we have done amazing work with limited resources. I mean, the folks at UConn, at DEEP, at DPH, at DOT, they have done absolutely amazing work with the resource that they have, but there's no way to kind of pull it all together and unify all those efforts the way our other states have, our neighboring states. So, if we did a big project for Mass DOT, where we did an asset inventory of all their culverts and the flood likelihood, and they just had that data ready and available. We get a proposal, we get an idea for a project. We can just hop online, get data, and start thinking. In Connecticut, it's not that easy. There's you have to know who to ask, you have to know who to call, you have to hope that you can get what you need, and if you can't, you got to go without. It's a difficult situation. So, for example, air photos. This is a GIS right here. If you haven't seen GIS before, this is it live and in action on my screen. I live in the town of Branford, so I zoomed into a little neighborhood here in Branford. This was a newly built neighborhood. This air photo is from our 2019 flight. This is what is a 6-inch pixel resolution, which, you know, it's not bad. It's, you know, you can see it on the screen. But in 2016, we had 3-inch pixel resolution. Now, this neighborhood wasn't here. This is just an example of why we need constant updates, because things always change. Let me go over to my town library. So this is the 3-inch pixel from 2016. It's really nice and crisp and clear. It's going to take just a little second to load up. It looks really great. We had that. This photo was funded through luck. Really, that all the different regional planning organizations pulled together their regional performance incentive grant money. You know, Eric Snowden really led the charge, and others, and got us this statewide aerial photograph. And they wanted to do the same thing again in 2019, but they just ran into difficulties. There's just different mechanisms in play. And so we got something a little less quality.
And Meg, if I may, I have been pretty easygoing on everyone with time, but we have someone who actually needs to leave.
Sure. So I'm not gonna belabor the point too much longer, but I'm just here as a member of private industry, and also I worked for the city of Milford for 11 years as their one of their GIS people, and there is just such a demand and such a need for GIS coordination to really unify and strengthen and bolster all these wonderful efforts and really push us upward and forward. So thank you very much for your time and the opportunity to chat here today. I'm going to stop with my share.
Megan, thank you so much for giving us the clear examples of how that impacts projects. Just because of timing, I'm going to switch things up a little bit. We have 2 more presenters to talk about the work that's done in agencies, but I'm going to actually ask Tyler Claycamp, excuse me, to jump in, and OPM and Yukon folks, forgive me, but if we can hear from Tyler before he has to leave us, that would be absolutely wonderful.
Thanks, and I apologize for disrupting. I have a relatively important call at 3:30. So my name is Tyler Claycamp. I work at Georgetown University in a place called the Beck Center for Social Impact and Innovation. I still actually live here in Connecticut, so I'm really just approaching this as somebody who wants to see Connecticut state government work as effectively as possible. I spent about 18 years in state government, so and a lot of that doing GIS work. And so I think the sort of point of what I'm trying to make here is, what does a successful state look like when it comes to GIS? And in my role, I work with a bunch of states and help them use data and do different things effectively. And there are 2 key components of successful GIS. One is that there's actually a person responsible for doing it in the state, for coordinating those activities at a bare minimum. Some states call it a geographic information officer, some states call it a GIS coordinator. But if you zoom out nationally, all but 5 states have that position that exists in some formal capacity. And if you zoom in a little closer to New England and the Northeast, every single state has something, from Maryland all the way up to Maine. The second component is that there's a body that is a coordinating body, a governing body, an advisory body, to help that person or that office charged with coordinating it prioritize their work, communicate the efforts that are ongoing across those organizations. And again, if you zoom out nationally, all but 7 states have some formal body. The 7 that don't, actually, I would say the 6 that don't, have some type of informal group. And then there's sort of Connecticut, which has been, working in sort of an adhocracy for a while now. And to kind of put this into context of why like centralizing portions of this work are important, I thought I'd just give you a couple of use cases that might resonate, especially with the Planning and Development Committee. So you've probably seen, and if you haven't, I encourage you to look at the zoning atlas that Desegregate Connecticut put together. An army of volunteers went town by town and scraped zoning data to paint a clear picture of what zoning looks like in Connecticut. Massachusetts, who has Mass GIS, did this in 1999, okay? 1999, so before Y2K. So when everybody was like trying to make computers resilient against Y2K, Massachusetts compiled zoning data for their entire state through their GIS office. Crumbling foundations. We still don't know in Connecticut the number of properties that might be potentially affected by crumbling foundations. Mass GIS knows because they have statewide parcel data. And this is a question that you could actually answer in a matter of hours if you had that data. And here we are in Connecticut, still trying to figure it out and just hoping like somebody will go online and fill out a form and tell us that they think they might have a crumbling foundation. Speaking of COVID, if we go down to Maryland, Connecticut has a COVID dashboard. I'm intimately familiar with the effort that went into creating that. It was no small feat, but Maryland, who has a centralized GIS capacity, was the very first state out of the gate with public information on COVID. And they did it exclusively through their GIS platform, working through their state GIS office. An agency you might not see listed here that's not participating in DCF, Maryland also uses GIS to help more effectively place foster children in homes that can more adequately serve their need. So when we think about the value of coordinating this activity and centralizing some of these components, look to these states and look at what they're able to do for not only the sort of super users that we see here today who are, to coordinate these activities, but think about the agencies that actually don't have this capacity. Who are they going to pick up the phone and call when they're trying to do something, whether it's GIS, maps? Some of our largest agencies in Connecticut, DSS, DCF, have some capability, but would benefit from some centralized capacity, whether it's through the tech platform, whether it's through the ability to gather data or just understand what the technology can do for them. And then beyond that, you kind of work down. We've heard a lot about the benefits from municipalities and other organizations in terms of coordination. And so really what you want to do from sort of a statewide level is look at what are the core components of these sort of data sets that are the foundation of it, coordinate the stewardship of those. Some of those may not have a home, so they'll need to fall inside a GIS office. Some of those will fall within DOT. Then you need to start setting up the systems and the technology. Somebody needs to be responsible for managing it. Again, that's why you have a coordinator that can do that. And quite frankly, I can say this because I don't work in state government anymore. This does cost money, right? It doesn't cost a lot of money. It's probably a rounding error in the budget. It's probably less than a rounding error in the budget, frankly, in terms of the funding that Connecticut would need to get this stood up. But there do need to be people, there needs to be process, there needs to be technology, and there needs to be money to sustain it. And the successful GIS programs in Massachusetts, in Vermont, in Maryland, in the other 45 states that actually do this, all have those core components. So I'm going to pause there and turn it back over to your regular programming.
Tyler, thank you so much. And I think both what you and Meg have said has really underscored just how amazing this community of GIS professionals that we have on this call with us are. I mean, it really does blow me away, the kind of work that all of you have done to put up so many things for the state. And it really speaks to the opportunity for just communication. But speaking of, trying to bring things together and really helping to coordinate and guide our efforts in the state, we have with us today two people from OPM, one who I've had the pleasure of working with quite a bit during this past year in this process, Eric Lindquist, Eric with the C, as I call him, and also joined today by Scott Gall. And I will turn it over to the two of you.
All right, great. Thank you, Representative McCarthy-Vahey. And I'll also thank Tyler, who is my predecessor and who I've learned quite a bit from, including the value of GIS and how states coordinate it. So I think there's certainly, I'm grateful for the time in this forum, and I think there's a lot of potential to improve what we're currently capable of doing. I think Eric and I are going to sort of split this up and talk about some of the things that OPM does now, just so folks have some awareness of that, acknowledging again that the reason for the discussion today is so that we can make progress and move forward. So I think our primary focus here in Office of Policy Management is really on coordinating and reducing duplication of effort. Although Eric's going to talk more about the specific role that OPM plays for things related to conservation, development, policy, and planning. And again, I want to reiterate, we know more that can be done, but we want to ensure that folks are aware of some of the things that are already in place so that we can improve upon those rather than creating something new. So I think Eric, I'm going to click to the second slide. I can't click, right? All right, pass the mic.
All right, thanks, Scott, and thanks everyone. It's great to be here. Yeah, I just wanted to start off talking a little bit, separating out OPM's roles as they relate to GIS. I'm an environmentalist or environmental analyst or a planner within OPM. And one of the major part of my roles is dealing with comprehensive planning. And OPM functions as sort of the state planning office, or what the state planning office used to be, in the sense that it coordinates state agency plans and policies and sets forth priorities for state investments. And this type of comprehensive or centralized planning promotes a responsible and structured approach to the development and conservation of our land and natural resources. But this type of good planning really can't occur without efforts to create and maintain robust and updated GIS layers that reflect current development patterns, demographics, our land resources, etc. And so OPM's planning efforts and those of other agencies really are inherently limited by its access to high quality GIS spatial data. We work at OPM and within other agencies with what's available to us, but there is always the potential to do better. I think you've heard that from some of the other presenters today. If additional data and resources become available, we can all become better planners and do better things with our state's resources. So that's a little bit about the planning side and the importance of GIS and data and investments in geospatial data for planning. And that's relevant because the Planning and Development Committee have oversight of the State Plan of Conservation and Development that some of you will be hearing about in the future. So for the next slide, we'll turn it back to Scott on state data policy.
Right, so I'm going to talk about data writ broadly, and if he's still here, anything that's successful in here, I really owe to Tyler, who laid the groundwork for the infrastructure that the state of Connecticut has for data. And if he's left, I still owe it to him. So I think Eric's going to talk in a second about some of the things that are more specific to GIS, but more broadly, OPM has a coordinating role for data for the state as a whole. And so we undertake that in a variety of different ways. And I want to reinforce, I think, something that I think of, we take a unified approach to thinking about data. There isn't a hard line between what's GIS data and what's not GIS data. I think we want to try and apply where appropriate, a lot of the same tools and methods. There's things that are specific to GIS data, just as there are that specific to other kinds of data. But I think part of the role that OPM as an agency can play is trying to find the common ground between those different areas. And so we look at data through sort of a unified lens of all the different kinds of data that state agencies collect, manage, and use in different fashions. So since 2014, the agency, again, really through Tyler's work, has taken the leadership role coordinating and setting data policy for the state and providing guidance to individual agencies. And we do this through, I think, 3 or 4 primary activities. We have a state data plan that's published and updated every 2 years. It includes a focus on GIS data, and I submit that plan every 2 years now to the Connecticut Data and Analysis Technology Advisory Board, which I'll talk through some of the details about in a second. We administer the state's open data portal, which hosts GIS and other data sets. And I think some of the work that folks talked about earlier, we've done hopefully a good job trying to pull some of those assets in so that it makes it easy for people to navigate the different resources that the state has. Now, the work isn't done, but we're trying to improve what we've got now through this single front door for data for the state. And last but not least, and I think this is not directly related to GIS, but some of the things that Tyler brought up about the work with child welfare and social services, OPM administers the state's integrated data system that links together education, workforce, and supportive services agency data. So we work directly with those agencies on their agency data in other respects. And I think that's, again, reinforces the rationale for taking sort of a unified approach to GIS and non-GIS data, because there's a lot of potential to find opportunities when you can get that kind of cross-pollination through the agency. So we use, I would particularly talk about the Open Data Portal for a second. It's one example of a shared platform that we make available to all the executive branch agencies to attempt to reduce duplication and increase coordination across agencies. We use that to house around 1,000 different data sets from different agencies now, I think less on the GIS front than on other areas, but we do post a lot of the state's administrative data to that platform. We've particularly worked closely with our departments of public health, social services, education, correction, developmental services, and other agencies to make sure their data on the COVID-19 pandemic and response can be posted there. And I think that's been an effort that it's at times challenging, but largely successful. We've had about 4 million people view that data and 2.1 million downloaded over the course of the pandemic. If your town, your health district, or your school is using data on the COVID-19 pandemic, I believe in most cases that's coming from the state's open data portal, and we can see where health districts, where school districts, where towns have pulled data from that state platform to be able to use at the municipal level, and I'm grateful that it can provide that kind of support. Another area that I want to flag for coordination is on data governance. This is something where, again, the state's put some pieces in place. We have work to do, but we've put a foundation in. The first step in data governance is inventorying the data that we have, and then building on that to develop a framework for how that data can be used. So we do have an inventory of all data that's collected by the state, and there's a lot of data that the state doesn't collect. But with the data that's collected and possessed by state agencies, we have a fairly comprehensive inventory of a process to keep that information up to date, and a process to figure out how that information can be used and get into the hands of different stakeholders. One of the pieces for governance is the Connecticut Data and Analysis Technology Board you see here, which is really a board that's appointed largely through the legislature. There's 8 seats that are appointed by 4 different appointing authorities from the legislature. Most of those seats are open now, and I think we really tried to encourage folks from the legislature to appoint folks to those open seats so that we can make that board as effective as possible in setting state data policy. And then I will take it up a little more than I should have probably, but I'll transition it back to Eric to go to more of the GIS.
All right, great.
And Eric, thank you so much. There's so much here, and I will continue to try and keep us moving so we can make sure we get some questions in.
So this, yes, apologies for the time. This is the last slide, Representative. This is the sort of meat and potatoes on what OPM is responsible for on its GIS coordination efforts. Real quick, you can read through the slide yourself. CGS section 40-90 is the statute that lays out the broad authority for OPM to handle GIS coordination. It designates OPM as the successor agency to what used to be the State GIS Council. That statute asks us to focus on increasing coordination, reducing duplication, setting standards, expanding the use of GIS. In general, as has been mentioned, the other agencies produce and supply data. OPM is there to provide coordination. And some of the ways we do that are listed on the slide. We coordinate with state agency GIS staff. We work with the GIS network on outreach and standards development. We provide technical assistance to agencies and others upon request. The list is pretty extensive. And as GIS continues to grow as a critical need, both within and outside of state government, there's always more to be done and always more being asked of us. And I think one of the challenges that we currently face is being able to live up to the expectations and the intent of the statute with the resources that we've currently allocated. we didn't really discuss what OPM's staffing looked like at the beginning of our slide, like other agencies had done. But OPM is an agency of about 100 staff. Only 1 or 2 actively use GIS, and no staff at OPM is GIS a primary duty. So all of these functions we try to perform to the extent possible, given that there is no 1 or 2 or 3 people that are focused entirely on these efforts. And that's the caveat to the great progress that OPM has been able to make in this realm that Scott's mentioned. But I will say, based on the feedback from other agencies, now may be the time for OPM and the state to start to take a look at whether we can sort of ramp up the pace at which we're doing these efforts, these coordination efforts, by providing a little bit more resources to them. And so, I'll leave it at that and move forward to the rest. Back to you, Representative.
Well, Eric, thank you so much. And again, to what I said before you and Scott both started talking, it's really tremendous what's been done together, working together, given some of the limitations. I'm going to turn it back to Emily, who is going to wrap it up and bring it all together. So, and I know she's going to be able to be quick and efficient, and then we'll take questions.
Sounds good. Thank you. Once again, my name's Emily Wilson. I work at UConn, and you can see all of the places there. I won't repeat myself. Next slide. So that side said CT Eco Mapping website, and I know the agenda says UConn. So there's a lot going on at UConn around mapping. There are degrees offered in the Department of Geography and the Department of Natural Resources and the Environment. There are service-based centers like CLEAR, where I work, the Transportation Institute, MAGIC, and others. And there's also a lot of GIS going on at our other state universities. But like I said, I will be keeping my time limit. So what I'm going to talk about today is the CT Eco website because it's most relevant to this discussion. Next slide. So CT Eco stands for Connecticut Environmental Conditions Online, and it's a website containing Connecticut's statewide natural resource geospatial information. It's a partnership between UConn and DEEP. And it is designed for users of varying technical sophistication. Next slide. So CT Eco really focuses on making GIS data and maps accessible to everybody. The easiest way to get them is what we call the map catalog, and it has over 9,000 PDF maps, mostly focused on town geographies. There are 12 map viewers and growing, and we've seen map viewers. These are the way that anybody can access these kind of maps, interact with them, zoom in and out, turn layers on and off over the web. So you don't need anything special. There's a whole lot of help and informational pages. There's over 100 map services, including 19 of them are the aerial imagery. So this is really important because this is the way GIS professionals, consultants, state agencies can connect to this imagery. They are huge. It's a huge data set, and it's a heavy lift if everybody was to do this themselves. So serving this imagery out in one place and making it available to everybody that way is a big use of CT Eco. And then we have a little bit of data download to those data sets. Next. So we did a survey a while ago, and a lot of people responded, but I like to highlight all of the different sectors that people responded from. So this data is used all over the place beyond people here. We had over 31,000 visitors last year, and that doesn't include the people that directly connect to the map services or the map viewers. So I know it's much higher than that. So because we have so many users, I get a lot of questions, and I'm constantly finding myself saying things like, oh yeah, that analysis is tough to do because Connecticut doesn't have that layer, or sorry, that layer hasn't been updated, and no, I don't think there are any plans to, or no, sorry, that layer is not available to the public, or yes, you'll have to contact each town separately and see if they can give you something, and no, it won't line up. And I really love when people give me feedback like, you should look at what other states do because they do a lot more than you do. When the fact is, this is a small piece of my job, and there's no way we can compete with these full agencies in other states. So CT Eco has plugged part of a hole across Connecticut in the past 10 years by providing access to some of the statewide data. And it's obviously a valuable service that's evident by all of our users, but we can just not fill this void given the resources that we've had so far. Next slide. So that was my whirlwind.
Emily, your slide said thank you, but I'd like to say thank you and a tremendous thank you to every single one of the GIS professionals who have taken the time to put together this information for those of us who are here on the Zoom today, committee members, but also those who aren't and who will be able to access this information going forward. It's a lot to take in. There's so much that you all do, and it's pretty complex. So with that, I would ask committee members or other representatives who are on the call who have questions, if you could use the raise hand function, which I'll remind you is at the bottom of your screen. I'll also just remind folks that we like to avoid using the chat function just because these are public meetings and we want to make sure the public has access to our conversation. So are there members of the committee or folks who are other representatives on who have questions for our tremendous, amazing panel of presenters? And actually, I will first turn it back. I am remiss in doing so. I see that Senator Wong and Representative Zullo and Senator Cassano have joined. And I know, like many of us, are toggling between Zoom worlds, but I want to give them the opportunity if they'd like to say a word to the group. Senator Cassano or Senator Wong or Rep Zullo. So I will, as we wait, and Mr. Clerk, if you want to reach out to folks too, you can do that to let me know if you hear from them. But I would love to just hear from the folks who are participants. You know, as you listen to one another speaking, were there any aha moments, or is it more of the, as I think it was Eric Snowden, Eric with a K, said, we've been having these conversations for 10 years. So it's nothing new. Were there kind of any ahas that people experienced, or anything that seems a little bit different this time than maybe some of the past conversations? Just curious.
Representative McCarthy-Vahey, this is John Guskowski. I was just struck by the numbers that were given by DOT and DEP and about the number of registered users and the folks that actually use GIS, which is to me just even more alarming that we're not better organized than we are. And I believe the word of the day for this whole thing was dropped by Tyler Claycamp in his presentation, referring to Connecticut as an adhocracy, which is just a fantastic term for everyone doing it, trying to figure it out on their own, and not having some sort of larger system of governance for something like this. That's the term of the day.
John, I'd actually like to.
Eric, hang on one second. I'll let Eric, and then if we can go to Rep Smith. Eric, Mr. Snowden, please proceed.
All right, I'll make it really quick. I talked about 10 years ago talking about this, and the term ad hoc, I can remember that from over 20 years ago when the first ad hoc Connecticut GIS committee was started. With some people that have retired, I mean, it's been going on for a long time. I mean, once mass GIS started up, I think people realized what was actually possible to do in New England. Thanks.
Thank you. And before we go to Representative Smith, I see Senator Cassano is here, and I know that both Senator Wong and Rep Zullo have been listening in and are doing as I suggested, having to juggle between multiple meetings too. So Senator Cassano, would you like to say a word?
Yes, the old expression, welcome to our world. It's a different world. I could hear much of the volume because I'm doing another meeting actually here in my living room. It's nuts. But there is one change from 10 or 20 years ago when this started, and that's the creation of the cogs as cogs with a little more oomph and a little more power than we've had before. We're not using them well yet. But to have that regional approach to a lot of these things is going to make a substantial difference if we do it right.
Well, thank you, Senator Cassano. It's nice to see you again.
You too. It's been a long time.
I know. I see Representative Smith has a question. Representative Smith, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the autocracy comment there, which is, I agree, a great term, sort of was a good segue to my question. Because of that sort of ad hoc nature of what we have being developed so far, and the fact that we're behind where our neighbors are. We saw some earlier numbers about use and all the various ways it's being used. So I'm just curious to know, how steep is the growth trend in the need to further develop these materials in order to have the capabilities that will match the needs that we have now and that you see in the coming years. Obviously, I think the point of all this is we need to do something in order to bring our capabilities up to a higher level of sophistication and coordination. And the growth trend that you may be seeing will give us an indication of the level of urgency that we're talking about here. Thanks.
Thank you for that question, Representative Smith. I'm wondering who might be most interested in answering that or taking a stab. And if no one wants to volunteer,
I'll volunteer for that one.
Go ahead.
In terms of the growth trend of how much we need to do to kind of raise the water, so to speak, to get us kind of all at a better level. As you can see, all of these state agencies, they've all in their own niche ways have really developed a lot of capabilities. They've developed a lot of expertise. They have a lot of resources. What we need now, it's kind of like, you got a team of great players, but without a coach, you're not going to win any games. And that's kind of what we need right now. We need somebody, kind of on the sidelines with the clipboard and the whistle, coordinating all of these efforts, helping find other agencies, find other towns and communities that need help, and matching them with the right resources. We have an amazing number of resources, and our talent pool is vast and it is deep within the state. But we don't have somebody who can say, let's all get together and let's look at our resources and see what we need. We really need that coach to kind of come in with a budget and with some good staff and with some admin support to really, this, as you can see, this software, this function, this GIS, it hits so many different levels: mapping, data, public data access, agency workflows, public sector needs, private industry. It's a big effort, and to coordinate it all, you really you need just a team, leaders to come up and say, yes, we can do this, and give them the resources and the means to do so.
Thank you, Meg. And I see Mark Hoover from MetroCog has his hand raised.
Thank you. I just kind of wanted to build off of that. I know Eric Lindquist mentioned the Connecticut GIS Network. So I'm the current president of the Connecticut GIS Network, and this is kind of like an ad hoc gathering, a volunteer of all the GIS professionals across different industries across the state that's been going on since 2001. And we've been discussing kind of these similar things, standards, base data, things like that. And we just don't have the funding or the mechanisms to make any of these standards official. So we've been kind of talking this, we just don't have a champion to kind of get our thoughts into action. And that's kind of where it's been stuck at for the past 20 years.
Thank you, Mark. And it's funny, I was going to ask Scott and Eric if they wanted to weigh in. And I love that you both put your hands up. So I'll leave it to the two of you, which one of you would like to go first. And the two of you will probably be, we probably have a couple more minutes maybe for another question. So Scott?
I'll let Eric go first. We might have
Or
the same
I was just going to be really quick, and then we can go to Scott. I just wanted to, again, reiterate the difference between better coordination and more investment, because there really is, it really goes hand in hand. There's a lot that we can do with more staff and more coordination of those staff and better leadership, but we also are limited in other ways in terms of just the dollar amounts that we put toward data development and data stewardship and maintenance. Also, other limitations in terms of what we're authorized to do, especially with local data, what we're authorized to collect, and the difficulty in obtaining a lot of those local data sets. Those are issues that we look to other states and we wonder, gee, they do it so much easier than us, but they had to overcome, they spent years overcoming those sorts of challenges of local control and inability to get the data they need. And so I just want to drive home the point that coordination is just one aspect of it, and then there are other aspects that need to be equally considered. And Scott, go ahead.
Well, I'll add on to.
I'm sorry, if I may, I just want to say thank you for making that point, and it's an excellent point that you make, Eric. Scott, go ahead.
I'll just, let me build on Eric's point, which I think is incredibly important and hard to see, but someone brought up the example of the statewide parcel file. So that, I believe, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong on this, the process to create that did not begin until legislation was passed that gave us the authority to collect that data. So it's not for lack of interest or lack of desire to do it. It really required a policy change to enable the state to do that. And that process is underway, and I'm not sure the final date, but like it's underway. It's labor intensive because we have 169 different parcel file standards to integrate, but that the legislative push was what was needed to kind of kick that forward. And I think that's hard to see, but it's really important, particularly for a lot of the areas that people have flagged for limitations. I want to underestimate that. I think to Representative Smith's question, the one thing you mentioned, the growth curve, where are we on it? I don't personally have an answer, other folks might, but one thing that I think we can do that's fairly limited effort that we've had some discussion, at least about within the agencies, is undertake a maturity assessment. There's a free basic survey that NISGIC, which is a national coordinating body for GIS, does. It's online. You can all read the survey. The first question they ask is the one that Tyler brought up: is there a point person for GIS in your state? And so we can go through the survey. We'll get a grade at the end of it. It'll be C-, B+, D-, whatever. I'm sure you'll have your own grades devised in your head. So we can figure out where we are now. And then, a year from now, 2 years from now, we can benchmark and see where we are on that growth curve. So I don't know where we are now, but if we want to measure progress, we have to set a baseline. And that maturity assessment is a fairly straightforward survey that we can fill out, ourselves, and would kick off that process.
Scott, I love that. The social worker in me, begin with the assessment. It's really important. And I think that there's been a ton of amazing conversation here today. I think when we raised a bill in planning and development, and I think Rep. Dubitsky's on, I think we had a little bit of conversation about, or I know he was with us at one point, but a little bit of conversation about what that might be. And we are still forming a concept, which would be in conversation with the folks here on this call, for sure, on the Zoom. But in thinking about this conversation, even, there was a conversation amongst folks around using the word centralization, right? And there certainly is and will remain and needs to remain within each agency and within organizations the capacity and the ability to maintain things organizationally for themselves. But it's I would suggest maybe the bridge building or the connecting or putting those puzzle pieces together that we can probably be doing a little bit more effectively. And how that works exactly really remains to be seen. Today, the goal was to just have a conversation to put a lot of information out there about what all of you are doing. And I think you really did that very effectively for us, to be able to paint the picture and show us all the different puzzle pieces that are out there, and just underscore how critical the work is that you're doing for our state and for our towns, and for so many individuals too, like Emily's last list, all the different people who access these resources, and for the reasons of sometimes life and death, right? As we said before with COVID and our test folks. Is there any final comments from folks before we'll wrap up on time, though we started a few minutes late? Lori?
I had one question for you, Representative, if I might. We often think about what other states do, and we heard about the great work from Massachusetts. Is there anyone or anybody we could bring from the state of Massachusetts to hear about what they've done, how they've done it, what are the details, how did they pull this effort together? I know they've been out there for years and maybe decades, but it might be good for us to hear about another state and the more of the details. I guess I would like to hear more about that. So I think it would be helpful to us.
Well, Lori, I'm so glad you asked that. We had a working group that actually met starting in July, August, September. I don't remember exactly when. I just remember having conversations when it was nice and summery outside. And then during the course of the fall, there were two different working groups. One of the working groups actually interviewed a number of other states. I can't remember how many we had, and compiled data to do exactly what you're saying, trying to figure out what some of those best practices were and to learn from that. We also have, with Tyler has that connection to us here locally, but now also to that national network. So what you're saying is exactly on point. We don't need to reinvent the wheel in our state. We need to recognize who we are uniquely and be proud of our unique personality and gifts. And I think someone said earlier, the talent pool that's wide and deep, what you all bring. But yes, I think that's really a critical point, is how do we learn? And to Scott's point, how do we take that assessment and use the learnings from other people and create that map and that plan, and then work through that plan. I think a lot of the folks on this call have been here before and have tried to go down this road and with this process. And I have to say, as a legislator, I'm committed to walking down this road with folks. I don't know exactly where we're going. I'm going to rely on those of you who have those data points on those maps to guide us, and hope that I can work with colleagues like Senator Nadelman and fellow planning and development committee members. But this hits across so many committees. But that's a really long answer to say, I think you're spot on, and that we're going to need to keep working together on this going forward.
And last thing, it's striking to me to sit back and listen to all of the experts here and how much funding has been spent by everyone out there. I know we've invested well over $1 million in our GIS system for the last 25 years, and it takes hundreds of thousands of dollars to keep these efforts up to date. Myself and Eric McPhee from our department alone, I think we've spent over $1.5 million in federal money to get our data system where it is. And we only oversee 6 data layers for public water systems. So I can just imagine, all of you out there and the amount of money that you've spent and invested. And if we work together more, I think we can save money. We probably could show that we would save money moving forward.
That is exactly, I couldn't agree more. I think Mark Hoover hit on that with one of his slides. That's absolutely right. If we worked together, not only could we save money, but we might be able to do things more efficiently. And I hate to keep going back to COVID, but that's shown us that in no more impactful way It really has. And I will say one last thing. I know Eric wants to make a comment too, is that data is today's gold, right? Data is the most valuable resource that we have. And it's something that I think we look at Connecticut and what are our strengths? Our strengths are that talent pool and the education and the ability to take that data and use it effectively for everything from public health to economic development. And Eric, I'm going to let you have the last word here today.
Thanks, Representative. I just, real quick, Lori made me think of something that I don't know, maybe it was touched on, but not directly stated, which is that because Connecticut does not have a dedicated funding program, a dedicated, like, for example, a dedicated base mapping program where on a schedule, every 3 years we acquire orthoimagery and every 6 years we acquire elevation data and planimetrics and so forth, it causes our municipalities and towns and utility providers and public or private corporations and so forth to say, hey, the state's probably gonna, at some point they're gonna realize they need to do this, but we can't wait and we can't play the wait and see game. It forces them to then go off and do their own thing, which is much more costly than the state doing it as a whole and encapsulating everybody together. The economy of scale is amazing. We saw it in 2016 when we came together to do that beautiful flight. All the regions came together. And that's an example of, actually, speaking of adhocracy, that worked beautifully because we had money, we had resources that we could utilize, and we came together and made something great. But having a schedule, having a program in place that's funded and protected from cuts, and that folks on the outside and on the inside can count on to exist, that's integral to moving the needle forward. And so I just wanted to make that point.
Well, Eric, as I promised, you have the last word today. I, again, cannot say thank you enough, especially to John and Emily for continuing to guide this process and conversation, which we will continue, as I often say, to be continued. But today was a tremendous presentation by all of you, and I just want to say thank you. I wish you all a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.